Many thanks to PPA for sponsoring this week's video. When I review my earliest work, they all have the same rookie mistake that once you see it, it's super hard to see anything else. And this is not just a me thing. I actually see this mistake quite often in others' work as well. But what's so interesting is that most folks don't even realize they're doing it until it's brought to their attention. And once that happens, they can never unsee it again. And in this video, I'll share with you how you can drastically improve your own photos by avoiding this awful editing mistake. This is an image from my recent workshop in the Highlands, and I edited this photograph the same exact way as I always used to edit images years ago, until I figured out that I was doing the same thing. And I will give you a second to look at this photograph and just see if you can figure out exactly what this awful editing mistake is. Let me make it a little bit bigger on the screen here so you can just take a second here and just think to yourself if you can see exactly what it is. So I'll give you a hint, it has to do with the sky up here. And this is kind of a general way that I used to edit all my photographs. I would go through the basic panel and I would always do the same thing to the highlights. And I see a lot of people do this as well in the one-to-one sessions I do where they crank these highlights down so much. And if you ask yourself, why are you cranking down the highlights so much? My answer was always the same way, is because it makes the sky look better. And that is usually the reason why most people do take those highlights and bring them down such a huge amount, because it brings out more detail in the sky. And the sky is usually important if it is part of your image. But what happens when you do that is, yeah, you are making your sky look a little bit more detailed and you're darkening it a little bit, but you're also removing a lot of the highlights from areas of your scene that you actually want. And this creates a really big problem. So I'm just gonna put this back to where it is. And the issue that it causes is it creates this overly defined sky. And if you have the sun in your image, this is really the big issue. You get these big halos around the sun. And if you look at it right here, you can see how defined the sun is here. You can see the sun right there. Then you have this one outer halo around it. Then you have another big outer halo around it. And it just looks super unnatural. The sun, if you were to stare at it, which I highly do not recommend you do, but if you were to stare at it, the sun glows and it radiates this beautiful kind of ethereal, glowing, misty look to it. But when you edit your image like this, let me open up my masks here and you can see I have a sky mask here and you can see I brought down the exposure a lot. I brought the highlights all the way down. I added a bunch of contrast to the image. I boosted the clarity and dehaze to really make this dramatic sky and to darken it and show lots of detail. But in reality, a lot of times the sky doesn't look like that. Clouds are not super defined. Clouds are fluffy and float around, but the sun always glows. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can, one, edit skies a little bit better, but most importantly, be able to make that sky or make that sun glow and look very realistic and have a much more, in my opinion, beautiful quality to it. So what I'm going to do is let's go back here to the library module. Let's create a virtual copy because I want to be able to compare the new sky and the new sun versus the old sky and the old sun so you can really see the point here. So I'm going to come up here to the develop module and I'm going to drop this down, just drop down the mask, and I want to delete this sky mask right here. Come up here, delete mask 1, and here we go. So now you can see that the sky mask has been completely removed. I'm going to come back here to the basics section here because I don't want to crank the highlights down all the way here to try and make my sky look better, because that's removing a lot of the highlights in the foreground and the midground, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to bring it to, let's just say -50. And I think that looks good right there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the new mask. I'm not going to use the select sky or the sky AI feature. I use it sometimes, but I really find that the gradient filter does a better job because the luminance or the brightness value of the sky at the horizon and the brightness value of the sky above the horizon is usually different. And when you use Sky AI, sometimes it just creates the same luminance value across the entire sky. And I find that it doesn't always create the most realistic look. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna select linear gradient. I'm gonna bring it over here. If you ever have a hard time keeping this level, you can just hold down the shift key and that'll kind of lock it in place. I'm gonna bring it down to a point right here, I think looks pretty good. And here I'm gonna just bring the exposure down a little bit, maybe about there. Now we can bring down the highlights a fair amount because it's only relegated just to the sky itself. And I think that that looks nice to about there. We can bring a little bit of contrast into the sky as well, just to kind of make it pop a little bit. But as you can see right here, we're still getting that kind of overly defined sun. We're getting those really harsh halos around it, and that's exactly what we do not want to happen. I am going to put a little bit of clarity in the sky here as well. As you can see, when you rock this back and forth, that clarity makes a huge difference in the sky, but you really want to be careful because the last thing you want is to make your sky look overly defined or almost a crunchy feeling. Because remember, clouds are obviously very soft and fluffy, and you really want to kind of preserve that. But clarity is good to kind of bring a little bit of structure to it. So I'm going to bring this to a pretty low level, maybe about 20, I think looks good right there. And as you can see, we are still getting that halo right through there, and we want to remove that. So what I'm going to do, and this is an amazing trick, if you ever have the sun in any of your photographs, even if the sun actually is not in your image, and say it's just off frame, but all that sunlight is pouring in, you still use this technique, and it just creates such a beautiful look. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the plus sign here, and we're going to come over here to radial gradient. I'm going to draw a big radius around the sun here to maybe about like this, drag it over here, maybe bring it up just a touch to something about right there. I will probably change the size of this here in a few moments. But the most important thing here, not the most important, but one of the most important things is to make sure your feather is at 100. You don't want to be at 0. You can see that super defined edge right there. That's exactly what we do not want. We want this to be a very, very soft transition. So I'm thinking something like this, maybe even make it a little bit bigger across the scene. Something to about right there, I think looks pretty good. Now, real quick, before I do carry on, I do just want to say a huge thanks to the sponsor of this week's video, which is Professional Photographers of America, or PPA for short. Now, I know I've mentioned this on quite a few occasions over the years, but one of the top reasons why I'm a member of PPA is their straightforward approach to insuring camera gear. They offer up to $15,000 worth of coverage with a $50 deductible for repairs and a $350 deductible for full replacement of equipment loss. This gives me the peace of mind knowing my gear is protected not only from damage, but also theft or any other unforeseen event that may occur. And with a PPA membership, you'll also receive data loss negligence and malpractice protection with PPA's indemnification trust, along with professional development tools designed to help you grow your skills with mentorship programs and even portfolio reviews. So join a community of over 35,000 photographers and check out the link in the description below for additional information on a PPA membership along with a special discount as well. So once you have your radial filter in place and you have your feather at 100, what you want to do, or what I like to do, is I like to bring the exposure up now. And it sounds completely counterintuitive because we just brought the exposure down across the whole sky, but we want to make that sun really glow and really stand out. We're going to bring that up a fair amount. I'm actually going to bring the contrast down a little bit because as I rock this back and forth, you can see that negative contrast actually softens that area around the sun quite a bit. And I'm going to bring maybe up the highlights just a little bit as well. And I'm going to come down here to the effects section. And this is one of the most important aspects of this technique. As I rock this back and forth, you can see what that's doing to the area around the sun. So I'm going to bring the clarity down a fair amount. Same thing with the dehaze. As I bring this back and forth, you can see what that is doing. It is really accentuating that glow. So I'm going to bring this down a fair amount. I'm going to overdo it a little bit just so it's easier to see at home, but you can already start to see that that sun is no longer so defined and that sun really is having that glowing quality. In my opinion, it is absolutely beautiful. We can even bring down the texture a little bit as well to really soften that entire area up. And as we toggle this on and off, you can see what a huge difference those 3 sliders have made. So just in summary, negative dehaze, negative clarity, negative texture, that's really the secret ingredient as to how you really want to make this sun glow. And then we'll close this down here. If you want, you can soften it even more by playing with the black slider and bringing it back and forth. I'm going to bring it up a little bit to kind of soften that area even more. And now let's come up here and let's toggle that entire sun edit on and off. So this is the way it started before, and this is where we're at right now. So this is before and after, and what a world of difference it has made. I think I'm going to close this area down here. I think I'm going to make it a little bit bigger to really kind of show off this glowing quality to it, because that sunlight kind of raking across this beautiful geothermal hot spring is one of my favorite aspects of this image. But that glow, that beautiful soft light was completely lost in the original version here, which I'll do a comparison here in just a few moments. And if you want to take it a step further, don't be afraid to play around with the temperature as well. Now, you don't want to get anything like that right there, but if you really want to show it off a little bit, you can add a little bit of warmth to it. Maybe we can toggle that on and off and see if that makes a difference that you can easily see at home. I can see it, hopefully you can as well. It's very, very subtle. And maybe I'll even bring that exposure up just a little bit more. Maybe bring down the white point just a touch. But as you can see, let me zoom in here. You can see you no longer have that defined sun anymore. You no longer have that one outer halo. You no longer have the big outer halo. It all just bleeds together. And if you were, once again, don't recommend it, but if you were to look at the sun, this is more, I should say, this is more an accurate representation of what it would look like. And it adds such a beautiful quality to this photograph. Now, this would be worthless if we don't do a comparison here. So let's compare these two right here. So this on the right is the before, this on the left is the after. And if we zoom in here, you can see the difference here. Yeah, of course, here you can actually see the sun. Here's those outer halos that circle the entire image, and I should say the entire sun. And now look at it, completely different. And I think that this right here looks so much better. But what's so important here is that what we did is not just make the sun glow, which I think is super important, but we made the sun glow. We selectively used our highlight slider. We did not remove all the highlights from our photograph. We brought the highlights down to, I think it was -50 across the entire scene. And then we brought our highlights down substantially on the sky itself. So we got very targeted with what we did right there. And from there, we went ahead and only edited the sky by making that sky glow a little bit. We also darkened the sky. We added some contrast to it. But most importantly, we've created that kind of ethereal, soft look to the sun. And I can't stress this enough. This technique is not only reserved for when the sun is directly in your frame, because honestly, I generally try and not shoot into the sun. I usually will try and keep the sun just out of frame, but I want to get all that beautiful light. So even in those scenarios, you can still use this technique where you just drag that radial filter just to the side of the image and then drag it over to really accentuate that nice, beautiful light. But this is a technique, if the sun is anywhere close to my frame, whether it's in the frame or just outside of the frame, I use this technique on every single one of my photographs, and I hope it is something that you found some value in as well. If you have any questions about this technique or anything that we covered in this week's video, please leave those in the comments section below, and I will do my best to get back in touch with you as soon as humanly possible. And be sure to check out the link in the description below for some information on a PPA membership today. And if you did enjoy this week's video, if you could, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And as always, I really do appreciate you carving out a little bit of time to spend it with me here today. And I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.